Thanks, Chris. Thanks for being here. Palm Sunday. On such a sacred day, maybe it's worth us remembering a kind of odd question that Jesus once asked of his followers. If a child asks you for bread, he said, will you give him a stone? And on the face of it, a question like that's a bit of a no-brainer. But it troubled his followers, I think, and it continues to trouble us now. When children arrive on our shores, pleading for bread, for mercy, for safety, for refuge, do we give them what they desperately need? Or do we avert our gaze and turn them away and send them packing with nothing but a stone to weigh them down? All across Australia today, citizens are gathering to consider this troubling question and to answer it honestly, I hope, to speak the truth amongst themselves and to each other. And with the example of Jesus of Nazareth, to speak truth to power. We're not here to praise the conventions of our day, but to dissent from them, to examine them, to hold them to account. We're here, my friends, to call a spade, to declare that what has become political common sense in Australia in the last 15 years is actually nonsense. And it's not just harmless nonsense, it's vicious, despicable nonsense. For something is festering in the heart of our community, something shameful and rotten. It's born of a secret, I think, something we don't like to acknowledge and something that we hide at terrible cost. You see, this is our secret. We're afraid. We're afraid of strangers. We're even scared of their traumatised children. Yes, this big, brash, rich nation, it trembles. When people arrive with nothing but the sweat on their backs and a crying need for safe refuge, we're terrified, especially if they arrive on a boat. Somehow, the addition of a boat just makes everything worse. It terrifies us even more. So great and wild is our fear of maritime arrivals, we can no longer see victims of war and persecution as people like us. We can't see them as fellow humans. This fear has deranged us. It overturns all our moral standards, our pity, our tradition of decency, to the extent that we do everything in our power to deny these people their legal right to seek asylum. They're vilified as illegals, their suffering is scoffed at or obscured, and our moral and legal obligations to help them are minimised or contested or traduced entirely. Our leaders have taught us that we need to harden our hearts against these people. The political slogans, I think, have begun to do their work. The mantras of fear have been internalised. We can sleep at night, we tell ourselves, because these creatures, these objects are gone. We didn't just turn them away, we made them disappear. But will we sleep easy? I really wonder. We weren't always this scared. We used to be better than this. And I remember this because I was a young man when this nation opened its arms. We opened our arms and our hearts to tens and thousands of fleeing Vietnamese. Back then, we took pity on suffering humans. There were no cages, no secret gulags. We had these people in our homes and our halls and our community centres. They became our neighbours, our schoolmates, our colleagues at work. And the calm, humane reception that we gave them reflected the decency of this country. Malcolm Fraser asked the best of us. And despite our misgivings, we rose to the challenge. Now it's different. 15 years ago, our leaders began to pander to our fears. And now, whether they like it or not, they are at the mercy of those fears. Fear has turned us. In our own time, we have seen what is plainly wrong, what is demonstrably immoral, celebrated as not simply pragmatic, but right and fair. Both mainstream parties, as we've heard today, pursue asylum seeker policies based on cruelty and secrecy. A hard-hearted response to the suffering of others is the common sense of our day. But in the days of Charles Dickens, child labour was common sense. So was the routine degradation of impoverished women. Charity in those days was punitive. The suffering of children was inconsequential. The poor of Victorian England were human garbage. Common sense saw them exported, offshored in chains to a gulag a long way out of sight. And these despised objects are our forebears. I have a forebear like that. My convict ancestor was a little boy, what's now known as an unaccompanied minor, a child consigned to oblivion. I've been thinking of him lately. Whether I like it or not, public events have made that unavoidable. And after reading of the degradation of defenceless women on Nauru and Manus Island, I've been wondering how it could be that these things could happen in our time, on our watch, with our taxes, and in our name. From a brutish past, from brutish conventions, Australia emerged to build something better than Victorian England. We distinguished ourselves with a tradition of equality, humanity, solidarity. Until recently, we thought it was low and cowardly to avert our gaze from somebody who was in need. To turn your face from those people as if they didn't exist. We had special words, not very pleasant words for someone who did that, who turned their gaze from someone who needed help. I won't repeat them here, my parents are here. But that's where our tradition of mateship comes from. Not from closing ranks against the outsider, but from lifting somebody else up, helping them out, resisting the cowardly urge to walk on by. And when the first boat people arrived here in the 70s from Vietnam, we looked into their traumatised faces and we took pity. Now we don't see faces at all, and that's no accident. The government hides them from us in case we should feel pity. Pity is no longer a virtue in this country. It's seen as a form of weakness. Asylum seekers are turned into cargo, contraband, criminals. And so, quite deliberately, the old common sense of human decency is supplanted by a new consensus, one that's built on suffering, maintained by secrecy, cordoned at every turn by institutional deception. This, my friends, is the new common sense. According to this new dispensation, Australia does not belong to the wider world. We're nobody's fool now. We have no obligations to our fellow humans unless it suits us. Why? Because, we're exceptional and we're beyond reproach. We distinguish ourselves by callousness, by our unwavering hardness of heart. We will not be lectured to by outsiders, or come to think of it, by insiders either. Not about human rights, not about torture, not about the incarceration of children. We'll bully critics and whistleblowers into silence. We'll smear them. We will shirt front them. But to live as hostages to our lowest fears, we surrender things that are sacred. Our human decency, our moral right, our self-respect, our inner peace. To passively assent to this new convention is to set out together on a road that leads to horrors. To exile and cage children for their own good, to prolong misery in order to save life, to declare that the means will justify the end, is to echo the lies of tyrants. If this is common sense, I refuse to accept it. I dissent. And all over the country today, others are walking in peace and in sorrow to dissent, for we refuse to have these lies uttered in our name. Look, I have no special moral powers, but I know when something's wrong, and what my country is doing is wrong. So in all humility, he said, Prime Minister, turn us back from this path to brutality. Restore us to our best selves. Turn back from piling trauma upon the traumatised, because it grinds people to despair and to self-harm and suicide. It ruins the lives of children and it shames us. It poisons the future. Give these people back their faces. Give them back their humanity. Please don't avert your gaze, and please don't hide these people from us any longer. In another time, and very soon I think, our common sense will be seen as nonsense, and we'll have to ask ourselves, was it worth it? This false peace of mind, was it worth the price paid in human suffering? Jesus said, "What shall it profit a man to gain the whole world only to lose his soul?" And I wonder, what does it profit a people to do likewise? To shun the weak and punish the oppressed, to cage children and make criminals of refugees? My friends, children have asked us for bread, and we gave them stones. So turn back, my country. Turn back while there's still time. Truly, we are still better than this. Thank you.